Okay, cool. We're
Hey,
recording.
thanks a lot.
No worries.
Cool. So I wanted to chat a little bit about 11.11 and the path forward and some of the priorities there. So I think SSO wrap up is definitely top of the list. So if there's, I didn't add this to the manage meeting agenda. I will do that, the manage shared calendar, but there's an SSO catch up with Liam right after this call, just to make sure that we have all of the front end dependencies kind of planned for, managed, and if there's additional issues to create, we do that. Um, I think so. The first priority for that I'm thinking is really about onboarding. So if y'all haven't seen it, Matea's been working on a MVC for onboarding, and I'm happy to share my screen just super briefly. But the idea is that we want to have a new onboarding experience for GitLab, for GitLabbers. This is both really important for self-managed and for .com. So now we'll have this kind of onboarding screen here that is presented after a user registers and logs in for the first time. You can
I can
click
only
through.
see a white bar. I'm not sure if it's my end only.
Really? Try it again.
Too.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So simply, this is that's the screen that's presented. So we can click on Product Manager here, and then we see this kind of splash screen here about kind of what's coming next in the onboarding experience. We were dropped into like a pre-populated onboarding project that already has like a board pre-populated with issues. What's still work in progress is I think Matea is working on like a little progress indicator in the upper right hand corner, which can show you like a little progress bar and like a little outline of like all the steps that GitLab is going to kind of take you through, and the ability to kind of skip to like the next part of it. So we have these this kind of coach container here. We can click got it. And we'll have these coach marks that kind of walk you through different aspects of using boards. And so this is like another one. This will take you to the issue view and then have a coach mark up here. Ideally, you'll be able to, I think he's also working on like a skip option that if you get sick and tired of this, you can just hit skip and it'll just, remove all the onboarding stuff so you can kind of explore. And then I think there's just a few more of these, great, you just close now and then you go back to the board. And then that's essentially the onboarding experience. So a lot of work for front end, and I think so. What my message for Liam was that we have a number of back-end issues around like new routes and new controllers, and like how do we create the dummy project and then dismiss the dummy project easily. So we'll make sure that back-end that's their top priority for the new release. But as this kind of continues to evolve, like we'll see that issue get broken down into additional issues. So this is going to be, it's only one issue right now, but I anticipate this is going to be quite a bit of work.
Definitely. Looks great though.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this. I think that onboarding is something that we really need that GitLab really needs help with. So that's why it's a big priority. The second thing is cycle analytics. So cycle analytics has it's one of GitLab's crown jewels, and one of the things that we tell users is one of the biggest value adds for our application. Helps you ship software faster, and cycle analytics is kind of how you assess whether or not that's happening. But the feature is quite broken right now. Like the calculations are kind of misleading or incorrect, and the feature itself, like people really struggle with to make it work because right now it's locked to the project level. So we're going to fix the calculations, and that's a backend kind of only initiative that we're working on separately. But what Chris is working on right now is like the group and instance level overview. So you can rescope cycle analytics to the group level and or the instance level. So this is another issue that I mentioned to Liam that like we'll definitely be back in support. This is like second priority in terms of importance. But Chris is working on the design now, and he should have like something to share there relatively soon. And I click on that, and I realize I linked the wrong issue. So
I was gonna ask.
that's awesome. Let me just correct that right now. It's going to be Cool. I just linked the correct issue and the design issue as well. So so that's what's coming up there. And then the last priority is really about help improvements. So there, we need design work on adding a what's new. That we the parking lot while we waited for UX help there. And we also have this additional initiative that the documentation team is kind of moving forward with, which is like updating the help homepage to just simply link to docs.gitlab.com. So the idea here is that we currently package docs in /help, but we're going to stop doing that as of 12.0 ideally, and just simply like link out to docs.gitlab.com for the most part. So that means that we're going to refactor the helps page. So we're going to largely retain the header up here, but then we're just simply going to like remove a lot of the documentation here and then just add like nice custom, like nice user-friendly links to documentation, the GitLab forum, and then also the support link. So since this all kind of touches the help page, it also makes sense for us to tackle the what's new stuff in context of that. So Chris and Matej, I think Matej is out. But I'll get Chris to start on the design there, so that's ready for us in 11.11. So you can see the current board link there. I need to add the group labels and also the estimation needed. But that's kind of what's being planned right now. The other priorities that we haven't really discussed are internationalization and single Rails codebase. So Dennis, I would love to get your take on those two. So internationalization, I'm curious to know how that's going, if there are other issues that we need to kind of consider to get to that like 100% of strings externalized, or at least we kind of know about where we need to attack in the code base. And then two, single Rails code base. I just went and added like all of the remaining front-end issues to 11.11, but I'd appreciate your validation on whether or not that makes sense or we should do something else. But we can start with internationalization.
Yeah, so for internationalization, I don't know that we're really that far along to be able to start calculating the total like coverage yet. So that's like still like the big question. Right now, we're just starting to move forward with the linter so that at least we have progress made there, and we can at least ensure that for the majority, if not like 90, hopefully 99% of the files out there, they're already covered with the like already flagged for translations. And then if the linters can't accommodate for some of them, then at least we can approach those. But that's probably going to be the best we can get, which is still in progress right now, and will probably carry over a little bit to. It definitely will carry over into 11.11 because there's like we're making sure that we want to commit the changed linted files, but also incorporate it into Danger so that it's automated going forward. That there are strings that have to be translated depending on what files people touch. So as far as like where our progress is, like we're still working on the linting for that. I think Madsen is the one that's furthest along right now because he's been just breaking up all of the changed files into small merge requests just so that it's a little bit more manageable. But as far as like my Haml lint one, it's not, I haven't gotten to it yet. So yeah.
No, that's cool. I didn't know if our perspective, we haven't talked about this for a while, so I didn't know if, our thinking had changed on this, but that all sounds fine. The one question I have is, so you talked about the linters and also adding them to Danger. How did we ever discuss how we create the list of of views or files and create issues for each individual one? Kind of like the single Rails code base, like label in an Epic, right? Which is just auto-generated from a script, like the number of issues, and then we can either schedule them or have like a contributor kind of like pick those up. How do we get to something similar?
You mean for the ones that the linter can't fix?
Right.
I don't think we've had a case where we have to do that yet, but otherwise we would just say of the files that it could fix, and of that we can just then use the GitLab API to create issues for them. So
actually, I do have a bunch of cases now identified that couldn't be fixed by the linter, especially cases where you have HTML tags incorporated in the translation. Then we ideally want to move those tags out of the translated string and add them as parameters or arguments, stuff like that. And also, there's also a bunch of cases that Bob mentioned today in my merge request, where there's a lot of like logic, or where we want to ideally remove the humanized helper method of Ruby and, for example, create a really nice translation string that also shows up in the POT file. So there's a bunch of edge cases, and it really depends on the file. So I guess we could get to maybe 80-90% coverage with the linters, but then those extra or those edge cases require a lot of manual work to fix those. So those are quite tricky, and I'm not sure if we can create danger jobs for these cases as well. So it's a little tricky. I'm not really sure. We also need to have somebody from the backend team to also help us with those cases, since those are more like the backend files that we need to, or the backend areas that we need to touch.
Cool. So it sounds like we have a couple of follow-ups then, like for edge cases that linter can't fix, and then also some for backend specific stuff. So maybe if we can just collect it in one place, then I can just put them all together once we have all the linters, at least like once all the linters are further along, then we can just say here are all the edge cases and create issues for them and then label them accordingly, like how we would with a single code base.
And the other thing I'd like to mention, or I'd like to note here, is that like the linters, they would also detect a bunch of translations, sort of false positives, because they would point out that you need to translate error messages. And in some cases, we explicitly don't want to translate those error messages. So we also need to identify those areas and maybe fix them or exclude them from the linters. And yeah, so I'm trying to, I can come up with a list of areas that I have identified so far based on the MR that Luke already created. And then we can iterate from there on.
Okay, so for the false positives, then it sounds like we need something like where we add a comment to disable like ESLint rules or something, some way to tell the linter not to flag this.
Right, especially those cases where we explicitly raise an error. And then Bob at least mentioned today that we should not translate all these error messages. So, which makes sense, but the linters would detect them. I think there's a bunch of rules. Maybe I can take a look afterwards. Maybe you can explicitly tell the linter not to lint for error messages. I think there's like 6 configuration steps at the moment. Maybe the errors is the error linting is one of those.
Okay. Could you create like I don't know if this maybe should go to the Epic as a discussion or like some type of follow-up issue just so we can track all of these? Or I can, yeah. Is that something you could handle, Martin?
I can create a separate issue for it. I think that makes most sense. I'm just not sure if we should go by, if we should really list all the files, or should we come up with a list of scenarios or cases that require manual work, or should we really list all the files that need special care?
I think both make sense because, you'd have to specify, if we go through and specify the scenarios, we can then start to configure the linter to see if we can do anything with that to automatically start ignoring those and whatnot, rather than adding a bunch of like disable comments everywhere. But then obviously we can go on, and having a nice big list will be useful just for people to drill down. So I think they sort of depend on each other anyway.
It's whatever like the linter can probably, like if we can configure the scenarios for the linter, then it gives us the files that fall under that scenario, then that would be easier. So like, as long as we don't have to manually spell out each file by hand, because obviously that would be a big waste of time. So yeah, whatever is more efficient.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool.
Thanks. That's awesome. So the next thing I wanted to get your take on was single Rails code base in that initiative. The conversation that I had with Liam was, we should obviously schedule these issues, but I don't, it's kind of all or nothing, right? Like there's no value in us being first and getting, because it's, unless all teams are done, then, then we can't proceed. So I don't necessarily want to be first, but I don't want to be last. So what do you have have you heard from the rest of the front-end org about how other teams are approaching this? Are we approaching this in the right way? Should we continue, scheduling these kind of issue by issue? What's your take in kind of like how Manage pitches in and helps accomplish this task?
I mean, really, I think. Sorry, hold on. There's what's in chat. Oh no, sorry. Never mind. It's about internationalization. I mean, I don't know what other teams are doing. I haven't really taken a look, but I think it just comes down to how much we can actually fit into the milestone and what makes sense. If we assign it into the milestone, we just kind of do one full charge to just try to get it all complete, then that's also fine with me. I don't have a real preference. It's just depends on how much we have on our plate for 1111 in total. But actually, if a lot of these things are kind of UX depend, or if kind of the direction issues are waiting on some UX, then it might make sense just for us to knock these out in the meantime.
Right. I think that makes sense, because these are obviously ready to go and we need to get them done. And I'm not sure what the timeline for UX is. So I'm going to chat with Chris and Tay about that separately to figure out when are these dependencies to be unblocked. But that makes sense. I was just curious to kind of see how other teams are making progress on this. And if this, like I said, I just don't want to be last. But like I said, there's no value in us being first either. So cool.
Yeah, I think it's not scheduled to be complete until May, but I mean, there weren't that many tasks for Manage, so I don't see why we couldn't just, if it all fits in one release anyways, we might as well just try to get it all done, or if anything, try to get 70% of them done or something like that,
Okay.
and then end up in 12. Oh, I think that's we're not going 11/12, right?
Right. We're going 12.0.
Okay. So, I mean, I think that's fine. And yeah, just looking at it quickly looking at the deliverables, it's like we can probably just take care of it in the first half of the milestone anyways. So, I mean, we can take that approach and then adjust from there. I can ask also in the manager meeting on Thursday to see what other people have been up to. So.
Okay, cool. I'm just concerned about like the new onboarding issue, because I think that's going to just, when that's ready, that's going to be a large amount of work. So, okay, cool.
Yeah, at that point, I think we're going to have to break it down quite a bit, like, because yeah, there's like the whole guided tour part. I mean, I guess we just have to figure out how to split it up, because that whole thing as one issue is going to be quite large.
Oh yeah. No, it definitely needs to be broken down. All right, cool. Dennis, did you want to talk parking lot issues?
Yeah, so just real quickly, and we'll talk about it a little bit more on the Managed Weekly, but like Jeremy have been talking about how we can try to identify issues that are relatively low effort, but like may not, or maybe related to technical debt, but it could just be something like a feature request that someone's asked that has been like dormant for 6 to 12 months or so. And so we have this parking lot label where we're trying to flag those types of issues. I'm not completely sure on the workflow since we just thought of this, but like maybe we could say like if it's not going to happen, we just remove the label unless there's a reason for us to start to prioritize it. But at that point, we can just probably slot it into a future milestone. But I've already kind of included a couple issues. One, actually, I'm curious if two of them are related to Snowplow, but since that's technically owned by Fulfillment, I'm not sure if like we want to be hands off on that or still get it done. But I mean, like Martin had this issue for conditionally rendering the tracking attributes. And that's been, I think we've been trying to get that in for the past couple of releases, but we never were able to get around to it and then move to Fulfillment. But I don't know, I'm just thinking maybe we can try to approach that, or at least start making some progress on the approach for it, since it's going to be a bit tricky as we continue to use Snowplow in the future.
The word tricky is in the implementation for conditionally rendering them, or just from a technical debt standpoint? Is it like the longer we go without it, it just kind of builds up?
A little bit of both, because as we go along and add these data attributes to all these templates, and then figure out one reusable way to actually conditionally render them, then we're going to have to go back to all the old templates and like remove them. So the problem does get a little bit more labor intensive the further we use Snowplow without taking this into account. But also, like, I don't think we have an approach yet to how we would conditionally render these yet. So yeah.
Cool.
And then there's also other items like don't show GitLab.com gold trial and development mode and things like that, where it's like it's been open for a few months, and I think, I don't know if it's super intensive, but it seems like we can probably take care of it in the next release or so.
Okay.
But any thoughts?
So the thoughts are, I think that it makes like we can go ahead and um, we should prioritize the conditionally rendering snowplow attributes because it is technically fulfillment. I wanted to leave it with fulfillment because I didn't know what their what Luca was thinking in terms of like using snowplow, but it's something we want to continue to use. So, but they're not going to have capacity for it for some time, and it's going to be I think that she applied like a milestone that gets us to July. So we can go ahead and prioritize this. I will discuss this with Liam and see if we can get this in for 11.11. So I'll apply that milestone, and I'll let Luca know that we're going to go ahead and just prioritize this right now.
Did you say that we're evaluate whether snowplow is something we continue to use, or?
So we were having a conversation in the product team about how we can move faster with some of the analyses that we're doing, and we discussed whether or not we wanted to even continue using snowplow, if we wanted to go with something like Pendo. I've warded those concerns off. I think that we are going to definitely there's confirmation we're going to continue to invest in new snowplow, so that's all fine. But I wanted to at least resolve those discussions before we invested further into snowplow. So I think we're good there. So I think that we'll like I said, I don't think we should wait for fulfillment because they're not going to be able to pick this up for a while. The other issue was this don't show GitLab.com goal trail in the development mode. Do we have a proposal there? Because I know that Luke and I were chatting about this a little bit, but then we kind of, I don't know if we ever came up with like a firm proposal in terms of like how we wanted to handle this.
There were similar cases where we handle this in development mode because obviously we still need to test the features in development mode. So I think what the proposal was to have some kind of like super dev mode where you can enable flag to actually then simulate or at least force certain features to show as if it were in production, but you're still in development. I don't think there's a final solution to this though. But yeah, I think James Edward Jones proposed an option in the second to last comment. But,
I mean, I'm happy to prioritize this. I think it is something for us to do, but I don't think that I should be the one to drive the solutioning, since this is like purely for engineers to make software development easier when we're working on GitLab. So if they're like, I'm happy to move that discussion along, but I would demur to James, and everyone on this call who would know more about what a good solution is than I would.
Oh no, I mean, I'm not saying that you need to drive the conversation. It's just I think we need the time to like in the milestone for one of the engineers to make that conversation happen, more than anything.
For sure. Cool. Thanks. So we'll continue to use the parking lot. Thanks for creating the label and adding these issues, Dennis.
Sorry, can I get a link to that super dev mode issue if anyone's got it at hand?
Yeah, I'll shoot you on Slack.
Thank you.
Or Jeremy's faster than I am.
I'll also add into Slack just so it's not lost.
Cool. So I think everything makes sense. I'm just gonna take a look at it in the board view and see how much we can really slot in. But then we'll also take into account what's going on in this mile in 11.10, of course.
Right. So I think that from my end, what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply all the labels and make sure that there is enough unblocked work for us to kind of get started on what that scope looks like. And I'm also going to meet with Chris and Matei to discuss the UX timeline to see when that work is going to be available for pickup. Because I think that's the main unanswered question. Like if all this work was available for us to pick up right now, I'd feel great about the proposed scope and probably even cut it down. But I just want to understand that timeline a little bit better, and then we can kind of lock this down. But overall, I think that the top priorities are definitely like SSO, onboarding, cycle analytics, and then this kind of like these help improvements. And I think that'll be a lot of really high value changes for GitLab.
For sure. Is there anything we can do to help kind of break down the onboarding issues?
Yeah, I just until I know where kind of Mate is at the moment, like I'm not sure that there is. I think that I'm not sure how much of that we're retaining based off of that. I mean, we had that we walked through that sketch design. I think it was last week, and I'm not sure if any of it's changed or some of it's being removed or something. So I don't want to invest time in that until we have a chance to discuss that with Mate. But actually, he might be out at the moment. So maybe
Isn't he?
yeah. Yeah, he is. He's back. He's back out for the week. So maybe that doesn't make sense to break that down. Okay, cool. We're out of time for right now, but I will. Let me have a think on that, and I'll probably take a first pass at breaking that MVC epic down, the issue down, and then I'll send it out to this group for feedback, and we can go a little further from there.
Sounds
So I'll
good.
probably break that into an MVC onboarding epic, and then they'll have multiple issues there that we can kind of discuss. Cool.
Thanks for putting
Thanks,
everything
all.
together, dude.
Yeah. Good to see y'all. Thanks. See ya.